Hello, and welcome to our workshop. This workshop was previously delivered by SMU's Academic Learning Services, Writing Center, and Software and Application Support Center in partnership with the Patrick Power Library. As a result, you may hear references to other workshops, be prompted to take part in group activities, or hear references to the active chat from the original delivery of this session. As you follow along, feel free to pause the video and participate in exercises and activities as best you can. We hope you enjoy the workshop.
Hi, everyone. I was going to say good morning, but good afternoon. My name is Heather Sanderson. I'm one of the librarians at the Patrick Power Library, and I'm really pleased to talk to you all. So today we're going to be talking about understanding information sources and building your skills to help evaluate them for quality of information. So that's the information literacy, but also the media literacy portion is that we're going to be talking about different kinds of information. We're primarily going to be talking about the internet, but since these skills are going to be very useful to you as students, I want you to also think about it a bit differently. Most of you are going to be starting this whole new experience of university education, some of you in the Canadian context for the first time. So I think even more important now in these days when our primary mode of communication, of meeting people, of studying, of interacting with everybody is online, meeting new people, forming new relationships, talking online, taking courses online, all of that. It's really important to be aware that all information sources are not the same and that you need to educate yourself, in addition to what you probably already know about how to evaluate and choose quality sources of information. Because, it's not just for the quality of your assignments, not only basing your work on good sources, but it's also how you are presenting yourself to others. So how you're showing others that you are also a good source of information, that you are you know the difference between trustworthy and untrustworthy, and you can be trusted because you only share good quality information. So that's kind of like an ethos, if you will, argument. So a couple of reasons for this. So let's start here. Where do you go to find your information? Think about the times that you've looked for information either for your own needs or for your classes before, on current events or historical topics or study topics or whatever, class projects. Where did you go? Who did you ask? Where did you start looking for your information? So if you wouldn't mind throwing a few things in the chat, let's get started. Everybody have access to their chat? Yes? Excellent. Google, yes. Dr. Google. Yes. Textbooks, yes. Google Scholar, good, yeah. Anybody else? Yeah. Some professors say don't use Google Scholar. A lot of them don't mind. The thing about Google Scholar is that it's just another piece of Google, so you still kind of have to know what it is you're looking for and understand what you get, because you don't get a lot of information about the sources. Anything else? Psychology Today, that's a really good place for psych topics. Yeah, look in the library. Notice it's not anybody's first choice. It's a librarian's first choice, but we're aware that we're not necessarily the first choice. I like to think that we're the choice of last resort. If you can't find it anywhere else, come to the library, for heaven's sake. What about your parents? What about your friends? Anybody get their news from Facebook and Twitter? You read any books anymore? Yeah, no, they're not. Twitter has replaced news. Yeah, I have lots to say on the subject of getting your news from Twitter, of course. I guess my point here too is the internet. When people say the internet, it's not just one thing. It's a whole bunch of different services, and they are services run by companies. So it's a really good idea to have a sense of what you're dealing with as the source where you're getting your information from. All right, next question then. How do you know when you've found good information online? What do you look for as a sign of good quality? So if you want to put that in, yeah, citations. Anything else? Yeah. Verified by who, though? Sources and credibility. Physical books may not be ideal for quick, but yep. That's because books often have editors and they are proofread before they're published. So and they come from sometimes very reputable publishers. So there's the reputation of the publisher standing behind them. So you can get a sense of, where the information is coming from. The verified website thing, be aware that sometimes that just means that it's the people, they're verified that it is actually who they say it is, not so much that they verified the quality of the information on the site, just that it's not being spoofed, or it's not, somebody hasn't stolen the URL and is, driving traffic to the site, but when you get there, it's something else. I mean, verified means it's a certificate. Yep, government websites. Anybody else? Oh yeah, that's a really good one. Check if there's more than, can you all see the chat too? So if I don't read what's in the chat, are you going, what is she talking about? But yeah, if there's more than one source with the same information, so double checking, confirming, those are all good things. I have a few others, maybe. The author, can you tell who wrote the information? So where is the site coming from and who's behind it? Is the site trying to sell you something? So if it's a commercial site, or if it's a site that's an advocacy kind of site or anything like that, where they have maybe an agenda, and the agenda is for you to click the button and donate some money or buy something on the site, well, then that gives a different purpose. You could argue that the primary purpose of some of those websites is just to get your money. So what kind of information do they have there? So you want to think about things like bias too. All right. Now, what we're going to do for the next 20 or so minutes is go through some of these criteria. Here I'm calling them the ABCs. Yes, that's good too. Is the information being maintained by anybody? An awful lot of websites on the internet have dead links, and dead links are a real giveaway about somebody just put that information up, dropped the mic and walked away, and it's maybe terribly out of date. And depends what the information is, and do you need to have current information? So this is the kind of thing we're going to be doing right now. So when you're looking for the quality of the information on the web, you want to ask lots and lots and lots of questions. So you have to be your own little detective agency. There's lots of these mnemonics on the web. CRAP is one that some of you may have seen in school. I like the ABCs just because this is learning, and I'm a teacher. But we'll go through these more slowly. But basically, they're metrics of quality. So they'll stand you in good stead no matter what kind of information you're looking for, including scholarly information. If you can't ask and get answers easily to the kinds of questions we're going to be talking about, then you probably want to deeply consider moving on. Think of what you're going to use the information for. How much do you need it to be good? First one, accuracy. What does accuracy mean? Accuracy means things like reliable and correct and trustworthy. So is it right information? Is it correct? If it is facts, are the facts verifiable? Could you find the information somewhere else? If it's opinions, are the opinions based on reliable, sound information? Or are they stating opinion like it's fact? Can you tell the difference between opinion and fact? So how accurate means, can you trust this information? So some of the questions you might want to ask would be things like, can you verify it in another source? Exactly like, I forget who said it, but in the chat, but yes, absolutely. Can you double check the information anywhere? Does it include any reference to sources? And are the sources good? Wikipedia famously has lots and lots and lots of citations to all the articles. Can you track those citations back to verifiable sources? Are they real citations or not? And that's not just picking on Wikipedia. All websites, any of them that cite their sources, is that a real source or not? Are those real credentials or not? Sometimes it's not all that easy to tell. Depends on where it's coming from. Does the website have any mistakes on it? That's a really basic one. But, if it's full of typos, then, maybe it's not very good. And has the information been edited or reviewed by anybody? A lot of really good quality websites will actually have editors. Think of like the National Institute of Health in the States. All of those pages with information are reviewed by doctors. So, and they'll give the last date of, so when you're looking for health information, if you're going to a really good site, it'll tell you somebody checked this information. Okay, so next one, authority. Now this is important too. This has to do with who is behind the site. So who's responsible, if you want to look at it that way. So not just the author, is there a named author for the information that you're finding? And do they give any sense of who they are and what their credentials are? I once read a really interesting page and thought, oh, this is great. It's based on research, followed it back. It was a student paper project, and it was on her personal blog. And this was back when I wasn't as good at recognizing what blogs look like. And when I got back to the end of it, it's kind of like, she's a high school student and maybe she's done really good work, but maybe I can do better than a high school student's work for the thing that I wanted to do. So that's the kind of thing, if you track it back and figure out who's behind it, or if it's a page on a website, who is the website coming from? You know, is there an organization behind it? What's their bent? What's their point of view on things? You know, we say things like governments, fine. They're usually very trustworthy sources of information, but even governments can have political biases, and especially in the midst of an election season like is happening south of the border, information can become kind of weaponized in the you know, attempt to get people reelected. So you want to think very carefully about the source of the information. And sometimes you can't even tell, you know. Even a site like Wikipedia is edited anonymously. They have different tiers of editors, but they are very well known for having to lock down their pages sometimes, because anything that it becomes controversial is subject to being hacked and rewritten, and people post all kinds of stuff. And so you get these editing wars going on, and then they eventually lock the page. And you can tell that the page has been locked, and they say, you know, this is to prevent further edits. So there's all kinds of efforts going on behind the scenes sometimes to subvert authority. So some questions here to help. You know, who's the author? What are their qualifications? Can you tell who's responsible for the website? Is it from a personal website or is it from an organization? And if you can't answer questions like these, maybe you need to consider getting a better source. All right. I'm doing for time here. Next, we're down to B, bias. This is a big one. And biases come in all forms. I mean, you can say that everybody's got a bias some way. My bias tends to be that I want authoritative, objective information. My bias is a scholarly bias. But, you know, there are biases that are more pronounced than others, let's just say. And sometimes, you know, if you think about things like tone and language and implied consent, you know, any kind of statement where someone says, everybody will agree, or, you know, reasonable people think this way, well, there's a bias right there. And it's inviting you into that sheltered little group of people who think like they do, you know, and it's a very comforting place to be sometimes if you already tend to agree with what they're saying, but it's a bias and you need to be aware of that. In fact, there is a thing in psychology called confirmation bias, where we tend to seek out information that already agrees with our point of view. So it doesn't challenge us. Being challenged on our opinions and our beliefs makes us very uncomfortable. And if you want to think of it a different way, going to university means, by definition, having your beliefs and your ideas challenged, not necessarily undermined or overturned, but broadening your perspective and thinking about other people's points of view and thinking about things that maybe wouldn't have occurred to you on your own because you're reading different kinds of material. So when you're looking for information, you want to go outside your bubble a little bit and see what some of the other voices on this topic have to say. And you don't have to agree with them, but you should be aware that there are other points of view and see how sound their arguments sound like. So, and further than that, even, is the site trying to get you to do something? Is the site trying to sell you something or persuade you about something? So is there an active persuasion going on there? And that's all of that is kind of the opposite of education, is what I think. So some questions here again. What's the purpose of this site? Who's the implied audience of this site? You know, who's the intended audience? What am I being told about myself as I'm reading this site? Do I agree with that? Is it trying to educate you in some way? Is it trying to sell you something in some way? Is it recognizably touting a particular point of view? And also another one would be, how did you come across this information? Where were you when you found this information? And that sometimes can give you a sense, you know, of how to read the tone, because, you know, the context is very important. Coverage. I like this one too. This one is perhaps the easiest in some ways. You think about your average web page and how long it tends to be. Back in newspaper days, when everybody read the newspaper, there was a term above the fold and below the fold, like the big sheet of newspaper folded in half and you get the headline. And how many people would just read the headline in the grocery store lineup but wouldn't actually get the paper? So you want to put the big thing in the big bold letters. Well, websites kind of do that too. How much scrolling is involved? How far down the page is the information? So a lot of websites that have a lot of ads, that have a lot of other content that they really want you to look at, all that's at the top of the page. How deep is the information in terms of the text that you're looking for? Is it a couple hundred words? Is it maybe 500 words? That's nothing, If you compare it to your average academic article, which is tens of thousands of words long, there's a lot more detail and depth that it can go into. Again, who's the intended audience for that information? Is that just a quick hit of information to get you to look at a bunch of ads and maybe buy something or do something? So also, if it's a topic that can be debated, if there's more than one point of view on it, does it give a sense of what some of the other points of view might be, or is it just sort of full bore putting forward its point of view? So how balanced is the coverage? That's another point. And I don't mean that thing that the news does where it's just like, you get 500 scientists on climate change and then the one person that says no, climate change is a hoax. That's not balanced. That's the thing that news does. They're always trying to find an opposing viewpoint, but sometimes consensus is that person's a lunatic. Okay, I don't know if you believe in climate change or not, but that sort of thing. So I mean actual opposing points of view and a reasonable debate. So how balanced is that coverage? So some questions here would be, what are you planning to use this information to do? What do you need to be able to do with this information? And if it's for your courses, well, then you need it to be, I think, reasonably in-depth and reasonably developed and able to be able to support your own arguments with it. It has to be able to support you. So if it's just a little thin piece, then it's not going to do very much for you. Does it go into enough detail for what you need it to do? What age of readership is it intended for? I don't know if you're aware of the fact that most of the websites, like if you look at the pages and services that actually offer to build web content for other people or to review websites for other people or help you host your information online and get your message out to the public, they say things like the average readership is about a grade 8 on the internet. So if you are reading something that seems a little bit, superficial, it's maybe that kind of superficial content, again, designed to host ads and get you to click on things. So, the average intended reader of academic information is, well, you and above, right? So it's not somebody who didn't even maybe get a high school diploma. It's somebody who is at a much easier reading level. So again, if it looks like that, well, then think about who's the implied consumer of this information. And again, does it seem like more like filler to go with the advertisements? There's so much of that content on, and I'm thinking of things like about.com. It used to be easy to see sites like that, but now there's a thing called native advertising, sponsored content. Sometimes it's really hard to figure out what the advertisement is. It looks like information, but where is it coming from? So these are very, they're trying not to let you figure that out. So it is incumbent on you to try a little harder to figure out where it's coming from. All right, this is the last one. The changes? Yep, currency. All right, lots of websites are really, really unclear about how old their information is. So depending on the topic, think science, think health, think, COVID-19 and the research that's going on and how much our understanding of this virus has changed since March when we all went into shutdown in Canada till now. What do we know now about how important it is to wear a mask, versus what we knew back then, so you really need to have current information, don't you? And that list of symptoms for COVID-19 keeps growing and growing and growing, which is alarming. But our understanding of it has changed a lot just in 5 months. So that's just one example of where currency is absolutely key. So when was the information posted? When was it edited? When was it updated? There is a, you can use the Wayback Machine sometimes to find out the editing history of a web page. But, you know, if it's a good quality web page, it should tell you when it was posted. If it's a news website, it'll tell you when it was posted. For example, if the news can do it, you know, your average informational website should be able to have some sort of sense of being kept up to date. Another one, and it was said earlier, are the links broken? You know, if the page isn't being maintained, well then that's a good chance that nobody's looking at it very regularly. Can you even tell how old this information is? How stale is it? And, you know, is it good enough? Keep asking yourself, is this good enough? Particularly if you're using it for your courses, definitely, because your professors will also be asking if that's good enough. So, all right. Why is this so important? Well, like I said, the internet is not just one thing, and there's many, many ways that the internet is actively filtering your experience. For example, algorithms. How do Google rankings work? For example, if you're using Google, there's a lot of puzzling out, but they're proprietary and they don't really tell you how page rankings work. We know some things. We know like the number of links. We know maybe it's the metadata of the site that helps to attract the bot to when the spider is going around to crawl and index the web pages. So people are trying to get the right keywords into their metadata, or they're trying to have the right links, or, you know, those sorts of things. But beyond that, it's kind of a bit of a black box. So there's a lot of work being done at the moment talking about how algorithms and artificial intelligence are not necessarily unbiased themselves. They reproduce the biases of the societies that have programmed them. So, you know, think about filters for gender and for race and for sexuality. And do those pages get voted up or voted down? Does it come across as obscene material, or does it come across as objectionable material? And even if Google catches a site trying to game its rankings, it might even downvote it, you know, move it off the first couple pages, bury it a bit. So there are, you know, different things that can happen that in many ways you can't control or understand or even foresee. It's often very mysterious. There's personalization too. So it's based on things like your search history, your purchasing history. If you're, you know, I was looking at shoes a couple of months ago, and for the next 2 weeks, the same shoes, the same color, the same model of shoes off of the site that I had only looked at once followed me around. It was like, oh, look, there's that ad for those shoes again. I still haven't bought them. But, you know, that's just weird, right? And I have my Firefox, which I use religiously, set to dump cookies every time I shut it. So how was that ad following me around? And then there's big data, the information about you that you're not even aware of. So it's your history online, but it's also all of the times that you've had to log into something, all of the times that, you know, it's scraped your location information or done some sort of estimation of who you are based on what part of the city or what country or what part of the world you live in, what the sort of basic economic data of your area is, what your probable education level is by the kinds of sites you're looking at, like all of that stuff that you don't know about. And again, that's being used to help massage and manipulate and serve you back up information based on what they think you're interested in. That's very much how Facebook is working, but it's also how Google is working. You know, it may not be personal on the individual level, but you're definitely being grouped and categorized in ways that you don't know about. So search engine optimization is another one. That's when I do this in class sometimes for a game. It's like you Google Universities Halifax and see who comes up first. Is it St. Mary's this week, or is it Dalhousie next week, or is it Mount St. Vincent? And this is all the, you know, people who manage the websites of the universities trying to get the top ranking to be the first. You know, so that's all how companies can manage their web presence to be the most optimized to get the highest ranking in their pages. Channels. You know, are you getting your information via a stream that's also doing another layer of personalization and customization, like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or, you know, TikTok or wherever you're happening to live on the internet? And then, of course, there's the clickbait stuff, you know, and the advertisements. It's sometimes hard to see if it's sponsored content or what's called native advertising. So it's actually it's an ad that looks like information. Sometimes you have to look around the screen to see where it says advertisement. It says ad in the Google results. You can see that right away. But you have to be careful, versus clickbait, which kind of screams at you what it is. It's like, look at this. Oh, you won't believe this. So, and sometimes, you kind of have to look. And I didn't even mention things like fake reviews or websites that demand information from you before they even let you see their content. So, like, who is looking at this news article? You don't have a subscription. Hey, would you like to subscribe? Well, give us your email first. That sort of thing. So there's all kinds of efforts to collect information from you and then to use it to further customize your experience. So overall, my point is, there's a lot about being on the internet that we don't have any control over, that we don't necessarily understand all of the ramifications of everything that we do in terms of how it then is used to manipulate the information that we see. And I will give you one little example. As a librarian, I swear I wasn't drinking before this, sorry. I go from classroom to classroom to classroom around campus. And so my computer at work, tend to, whenever I'm searching Google, I'll get lovely, academic quality information, whatever topic I search, because, Google knows that I want academic information. But if I go around from workstation to workstation, if I'm in a lab or if I'm in a classroom or I'm in Nally or I'm in the Sobe building, I'll have my nice little package search that I'll have worked out. And over the years, I've just given up having a prepackaged search because I will get different results. So I'll get a page that I never saw before in the top 10 of results because I'm on a different machine. So it's very clear to me that my history is also part of the results that I see. And you can try this yourself. You can go to an anonymous browser and see if you get different results for the searches that you do. Something like DuckDuckGo. I actually just said DuckDuckGo as an anonymous search browser. Or you can turn on, the Google Chrome browser to be searching anonymously, or, dump your cache and dump your cookies and then do your search and see if you get some new things that you didn't get the last time. So these are all ways to try to break outside of that bubble that I'm talking about. Anyway, hope that's clear too. All right, so let's do an example of this. I'm going to try some screen sharing, so if you bear with me for a minute. All right, so let's look at a couple of things. I did some searching on students and online learning. Haha, very timely topic, I thought. And I tried to dump my cookies before we started. So what am I getting? Oh, just to show you the difference, the first site search I did was online courses. Look at the ads, because that's taking that to mean that I'm looking for classes to take. So ad. I've got Algonquin College, studyonline.ca, Queen's University, Centennial College. Hey, here's somebody who's interested in taking online classes. Take ours. So if I did online learning, that changes the focus a little bit, and I'm still getting a bunch of ads. But the first non-ad thing I'm getting, Pearson, they're an educational publisher. Here's a news site, CBC. UNESCO, there's a multinational agency talking about their education-based, so it's a part of the UN that deals with education on a global level. Again, we're getting things coming from various universities and colleges. And I got some news. How can I tell it's news? News, CNN, if you recognize the news organization. Here's another university, U-Waterloo. Engaging students in online activities, that might be kind of interesting. Here's another news site, but you can sort of see the sorts of things that I'm getting. You can do better searches than that. And this is another thing that I want to come out of this, is the quality of information you get back has a lot to do with the kind of search that you're doing. So for example, if I did students adjusting, notice that I'm not putting in phrases either, I'm just doing keywords. Google doesn't really care if you ask a question grammatically or if you put in keywords. It'll give you pretty much the same thing. It's better search engine and database hygiene to think in terms of keywords and key phrases than to put in questions and phrases, because then some of the databases the library has look for exact matches, and you will get nothing if you ask the question the wrong way. And that's really disheartening, because students don't often know when they're starting out that it's something that they've done versus that they'll think, oh, there's no information on my topic, but it has to do with how they ask the question. Okay, so what have I got here? There's a video, adjusting to online learning, adapting to being an online student, coming from probably Illinois University. Here's an article coming from a news source for faculty about how to teach to online students, tips to adjusting to online learning for students. So you can see I've already got more specific information. This is again coming from one of the colleges at University of Toronto. Here's one coming from Harvard. So I'm getting more information about academic, I could change my term, for example, to, instead of adjusting, I could put coping. Not even looking at the scholarly ones yet. 10 ways to help your students cope. What students are saying about remote learning, that's coming from the New York Times. I've looked at all of these already, by the way, so that's why I'm very able to say quickly, but you train yourself to look at URLs and to see, okay, can I tell what that is? And if I can't, then I would go into the site, like Walden Edu. What is that? .edu, that's probably a university, it's probably in the States. I got an ad. And how much depth does it go into? Does it cite any sources? Who's it for? That's kind of an ad for the university, information for its own students. It's not terribly deep. Now let's try, if I threw in the word report, I want to do this thing, report, entitled report. That's Google shortcut for saying, you notice how when you're on web pages, every web page has a title. So I want my results all to have the word report in the title somewhere. Like here, report, report, report. So you can make Google be very specific. There's all kinds of things that librarians know how to do better. And look at that, education plan and report from the Horizon School. Quality education for all during COVID-19 report, coming from Amazon. Saskatchewan School Board's report. National Observer report. I was looking at a couple of these that look pretty good. There's one from UNICEF. U report. Mental Health Commission, school-based mental health in Canada, a final report. So this is a way of making, and I can even do, since I still have 151,000, you'll notice how I'm homing in much more on my results. I can also tell Google that I'm looking for PDF documents, which reports tend to be. So there's that school-based mental health, Saskatchewan School Boards, there's the Horizon School, there's one coming from the government of US. And these are more substantial than just web pages. These are, you can get the full report. I found somebody's thesis earlier today, not to say that you need to read a thesis all the time, but depending, again, think about what you need to use the information for. Say you were doing a paper on online learning and students' coping strategies. You would want to have more substantial information than just a couple of lists coming from, teaching and learning, or no offense to the teaching and learning people, but, like something a little bit more substantial, maybe a bit research-based. One of the ones I was looking at said, we've looked at 500,000 students over the whole country for 10, that's probably pretty rich and deep data to be able to draw some conclusions. I had one from Columbia University. I will never find it again. Here's one coming from one of our, this is one of the sources that we have in the library. So these are, like I said, this is a way of filtering out some of the things that are maybe, this is just a snapshot of the chapter. If you wanted to see, do we have this book? you could go into our tools in the library to see if we have it. So let's do that right now, actually. I'm just going to get Scholar back on the page here. Scholarly articles. Maybe take report out. Oh, here's one. Students' Perceptions of Online Learning, a Comparative Study. Coming from the Journal of Information Technology Education. It might be available on the internet, or it might ask you to pay $30 or $40 or $50 to have a look at it. So this is something, so this does appear to be available for free, which is nice. Here's another one, Developing Early Warning Systems to Predict Students' Online Learning Performance. So what I typically do is I will copy that title. This is one of my main uses of the library catalog, by the way. Dump it in and see, do we have it? And there it is. Excuse me, I wrote down something that I wanted to look up later. Right, so there it is. Oh, that's our proxy server. It's down. So what normally happens there, fabulous, is that you get asked to log in at that point. I'm just wondering if this link maybe is down. Okay, so that link isn't working, but this link is. So I hope you picked up that there's usually two ways to do everything. This is where the library can be super helpful when you're doing your own research, when you get into your courses. If stuff doesn't happen the way that you think it should, if it looks like you should have access to something and you can't get into it, that's a really good opportunity to talk to someone who works in the library, because if the link could be broken, like that one is, and I'm going to report that as soon as this class is over, but it could be nothing that you're doing, right? It could be our side. We have some 30,000 online journals and over 300,000 ebooks. The links of any one of those things could break, and we wouldn't catch it until somebody pointed it out to us necessarily. So we can't stay on top of everything in the catalog. So don't be shy, get in touch with us, and that'll help everybody else who's trying to use that too. So here is an article then that I've managed to get in through the back door too. This is the PDF version of it. Let's talk now about the characteristics of scholarly information. All of the same questions apply that we've been talking about. But if you look at what they're doing, very clear what it is, when it was published, what volume, what issue, what year, what pages. This is the print version of it. This is the online version of it. So you're not at, and you can even see up here, Science Direct is the database that is coming in. So there's no mystery about what this is. No mystery about who these people are. You see all their names are hyperlinked, and they all have, if you click on the link, it'll tell you where they work. And actually even gives you, usually for academic information, it will give you contact information. If you think about why you might have that, maybe you want to ask for a copy or ask them a question, or maybe if you're a faculty member or a researcher, you might want to ask them to collaborate with you or to share some of their data with you. Whatever, you know, they stand behind their work, you can actually get in touch with them versus a name-free web page, which is your typical experience, or it's got a name of somebody on it, but who are they? It's really hard to tell. And not only, please let me, that's because I haven't signed in. Let's try this. No, I'm sorry, our proxy server's down, so I can't. Let's go back and I'll find what this one that's in Google Scholar that's actually open access. I'm wondering, Amanda, is there power on campus?
Yes, there is.
It's weird. Whatever knocked out our internet earlier might have been something. Let's find online learning, Eric Wiley. Let's see if AnitaCrawley.net might be the author. Okay, no, it's just somebody who put an article up. Same sort of thing though, you can see address for correspondence, where they are, information about what the article is about. That's called the abstract. It's like a little summary, copyright date. And then you start seeing the citations. This is your literature review. So citation, citation, citation. There's like many, many sources. So this is very different. When I said a grade 8 reading level versus what your average reading level would be in scholarly information, it's all pitched at a much more high reading level, a much more formal language, much longer, more detailed. This is actually reporting on an experiment. So it talks about the methodology. It'll talk about the results next. It'll show you some of the analysis of the results, maybe give you some tables. I don't mean to make anybody seasick, but you get my point, right? This is a very different beast than your average web page. The reason why you're being asked to use information like this is that it's gone through a process of pre-publication review called peer review, which when it works perfectly, it's reviewed by experts and there's very little bias, as much anonymity and bias taken out of the system as possible so that the work stands on its own merits, so that when it gets published, it's, often the author gets a report back from the reviewers and they make changes and make it better. And then eventually the journal will accept it for publication so that when it's published, it's a pretty solid piece of work that other academics and researchers and students can rely on and know that it's authoritative and see how many different sources are cited again. So, this is showing your work, showing all the work that's gone into this, all of the levels of work that's behind it. So if I go back to my PowerPoint. Oh yes, I wanted to say that we've got guides up on our website that'll help you with some of that Google stuff that I was showing you. So librarians love to share their information, but it's also something that we could talk to you about. So, all right, so just to summarize then, scholarly information, you've got your author and your credentials and all of that stuff is clearly identified. There's a clear publisher. You can tell when it was published, so you know how recent it is. The sources are clearly cited and documented. There's thorough research. It's often, if it's research-based, it'll tell you all about the experiment. So you can look at it and judge, too, whether or not it was sound. But it's also been through that pre-publication review so that other people have thought it was sound. It might use a little specific terminology. There's not a lot of pictures. It's very dense writing. It's very, can be kind of steep for new learners. Part of it, it gets easier to read the more of it you read. So, you probably won't be reading very much of this stuff in your first couple of years. But once you get into your upper years, you will be regularly being asked to use this kind of material in your own work. And it's for a very specialized audience, like I said, including you guys, like I said. So basically, though, at the end of the day, you're asking the same kinds of questions. Is this what I need for my research? Does it fulfill the needs that I have? How good does it have to be? How much of it do I need? How recent does it have to be? Do I care that I can tell whether or not where it comes from? All of those kinds of questions are all questions that scholarly information is designed to answer. So if you, if you find good web information and it's enough, you can always ask your prof if you're allowed to use the web and what kinds of websites that you might be allowed to use. But know that you have to do a lot of this evaluation when you're looking on the open web versus when you're looking in the library. And we have some non-academic sources in the library too. So you do still have to be able to recognize scholarly information when you see it. Anyway, I'm sorry about the server being down. I wanted to show you logging in with your S number. So when you register, you'll get an A number and you can turn that into your computer access number, the S number. That's how you get into Smutport. That's how you get into Brightspace. And that's how you get into the library databases. But it appears that our off-campus server is down. So I will be on that right after this. And that's kind of where I want to wrap, which is, well, that's a summary of what I've just been saying. The library's here for you. Email us your questions. We'll help you. If we're not if it's actually a question for the access people, we'll redirect your question. So you just use that research@smu.ca as a central point, or you can give us a text. There's somebody monitoring until the evenings and on the weekends. So, and if you happen to catch us after our service hours, the next person that's online in the morning will get your question and answer it. If you need help, though, getting books or getting access to, like when and if we are doing the booking of coming into the library, or if you have a book and you find a book in the catalog and you want to ask us to, like we do a door drop-off system. So any of those sorts of things, get in touch with the access people. Any problems logging into the library stuff, get in touch with the access people. There's my email. I'm Heather. I don't know if I ever said my name, but my name is Heather Sanderson. And if you have questions, we are here to help you. We're all very friendly people. So you're welcome to get in touch with me too. Thank you very much for your attention. And I hope you got something out of this session. I hope you found it useful. And do get in touch. Good luck with your studies.